The historic Katy Trail is a 225-mile hiking and biking paradise that meanders across the state of Missouri. More and more Missourians are taking advantage of the trail as a means to enjoy the great outdoors. Although many people use the trail as a way to get closer to nature, hiking and biking the trail has also become a popular way for many to impact their fitness levels. Now that you know the health and wellness benefits of being physically active, you need to know exactly how to get those benefits. Today's program focuses on cardiovascular fitness, which is without a doubt the most important part of health-related fitness. Welcome to Fitness and Wellness for a Lifetime. I'm your host, Steve Ball. The word cardiovascular comes from two root words: cardio, which refers to the heart, and vascular, which refers to the vascular system or the vessels, veins, and arteries that carry our blood. Cardiovascular fitness, or CVF, is also known as aerobic fitness, cardiorespiratory fitness, and cardiovascular endurance. Someone with good CVF can sustain activity for a relatively long period of time without stopping because his or her body is able to take up and use oxygen very efficiently. But to have good CVF, you have to be fit in many ways. First of all, you have to have a good, strong heart. The heart is a muscle that pumps oxygen-rich blood to the skeletal muscles so they can perform for you. A stronger heart is able to pump more blood per beat and thus is a more efficient machine. Besides a strong heart, it's important to have open and clear blood vessels so that the blood and oxygen can reach the working muscles. A lack of oxygen ultimately requires the body to stop what it's doing and rest. Finally, the muscles need to be fit in order to carry on activity for any extended period of time. Regardless of how much oxygen is flowing to the muscles, if they're weak, they'll require us to stop the activity. So really, cardiovascular fitness requires the integration of several systems. Why do we need good cardiovascular fitness? It helps reduce the risk for many different diseases, but most importantly, it's been shown over and over to reduce the risk for heart disease, a leading killer in this country. It also has a dramatic impact on many other conditions. For example, having good cardiovascular fitness increases your quality of life by helping you function more optimally without becoming fatigued. You're going to be able to work more effectively, use your leisure time more effectively, and enjoy your interactions with friends and family more when you're not fatigued. So how do we go about gaining cardiovascular fitness? First of all, you should follow the overload principle and do more than you normally do, placing demands on your cardiovascular system. You should also follow the FIT formula for exercise so that you do the exercise frequently enough, intensely enough, and for the correct amount of time. There are really two different FIT formulas that I'd like to discuss. The first is the result of recent epidemiology studies that found that performing lifestyle activities of only moderate intensity can improve fitness enough to see certain health benefits. I call it the lifestyle FIT formula because it doesn't necessarily need to be exercise, but rather daily lifestyle activities. Let's start with the F for frequency. For this formula, the frequency should be most, if not all, days of the week. The threshold intensity should be moderate or approximately equal to a brisk walk. This is the minimum intensity necessary to give you benefits. The time is 30 minutes accumulated throughout the day. It doesn't have to be done all at once, although most experts agree that you shouldn't do less than 10 minutes at one time. So 3 10-minute bouts per day would accomplish the same thing as one 30-minute session. Remember that these are minimums. Performing activity more than 30 minutes or at a higher intensity will usually result in greater gains. Remember that this lifestyle FIT formula says that we don't necessarily need to perform exercise to gain benefits. Everyday lifestyle activities such as walking to work, riding your bike, climbing the stairs, gardening, performing housework are all activities that can help us accumulate 30 minutes of daily activity. This is a big advantage because you don't have to be an athlete or enjoy vigorous exercise to see significant health benefits. This formula tells us that if you just get going and get started doing these types of things in your daily routine, you will see benefits. Keep in mind that these recommendations are for cardiovascular fitness and health benefits, not weight loss. For weight loss, it often takes more activity. We'll discuss weight loss in a future segment of this series dedicated to obesity and body composition. The traditional fit formula for cardiovascular fitness is called the counting heart rate method, but it's a little more complicated. The frequency is at least 3 times per week. The intensity is defined as 55 to 90% of your maximum heart rate, or 40 to 85% of your heart rate range, and the time is at least 20 minutes. This activity can be done in a relatively short period of time, 20 minutes per day versus 30 minutes and only 3 days a week versus every day. However, the intensity is much higher than the lifestyle formula. The advantage of this method is that it's designed for a higher level of cardiovascular fitness because it's more vigorous in nature. It's good for performance and for athletes, and it provides more benefits by taking you to a more vigorous level that cannot be achieved with moderate activity. Let's take a closer look at the intensity part of the FIT formula and the target heart rate zone. In order to ensure that you're performing the activity at the right intensity, we use something called the target heart rate or heart rate zone. Ideally, we want to be exercising at a heart rate that's not too low and not too high, but in the zone. During exercise, we can monitor our heart rate through a method called palpation to make sure we are in the zone. It's best to practice taking the pulse at rest first. The pulse is easily found at the radial artery on the thumb side of the wrist, or at the carotid artery located in a notch on the side of the neck. Palpate your resting pulse using your first 2 fingers. Make sure not to use your thumb, as it has its own inherent pulse. Count the number of beats in 20 seconds and multiply by 3 to get your minute pulse. To get a true resting heart rate, make sure you take it early in the morning before you get out of bed. There are 2 different heart rate counting methods. The first is called the heart rate reserve or Kervonen method, which tells us that there is a range that your heart rate can beat in. Obviously, it'll never go to 0 and it'll never beat beyond its maximum. The general formula is to first calculate the maximum heart rate by subtracting your age from 220. Then subtract your resting heart rate. Your working heart rate range is thus somewhere between your max and your rest. The American College of Sports Medicine recommends that we should be working somewhere between 40 and 85% of this range. This is your target heart rate zone. It'll take a few minutes for your heart rate to increase, but after it does, your goal is to keep it in the zone for the duration of the exercise bout. Let's take a look at an example of a 20-year-old with a resting heart rate of 60. The maximum heart rate would be 200, 220 minus 20 years. By subtracting out the resting heart rate, 60, the range would be 140 beats. By taking 40% of this number and adding back in the resting heart rate, you will calculate the minimum heart rate for that person, which in this case is 116 beats. The maximum would be calculated by taking 85% of this number and again adding in the resting heart rate. This would calculate to 179 beats. Therefore, this person's target zone would be between 116 and 179 beats. This is a fairly large range, and it's okay to tighten it up a bit. For unfit individuals, I recommend using 40 to 60%, and for fit individuals, 60 to 85%. Also keep in mind that when palpating the heart rate during exercise, it's important to quickly locate the pulse, because as soon as you stop to find the pulse, your heart will begin to slow down. Usually it is recommended to count the number of beats in 10 seconds and multiply by 6 to get the exercise pulse rate. An easier but less accurate method of determining intensity is called the maximum heart rate method, or MHR. Calculate the max heart rate, and then just take 55% of this number to get the lower heart rate, and then take 90% of this number to get the upper heart rate. So for our 20-year-old, 220 minus 20 will equal 200. 55% of that is 110, and 90% of 200 is 180. So the target zone using this method would be 110 to 180 beats per minute. Use the lower end of this range if you're unfit, and the higher end if you're more fit. Although both heart rate methods are recommended by the American College of Sports Medicine, the maximum heart rate method is much less accurate because it doesn't take into account resting heart rate. It basically just gives us a ballpark figure. So if you can, use the heart rate reserve method instead. If you prefer the counting heart rate method, you want to choose activities from the second layer of the pyramid and focus on aerobic activity that's moderate to vigorous in nature. Try to sustain that exercise at a threshold level. For some of you, it may take jogging rather than brisk walking to get there, or it could be biking, active sports, or any other type of aerobic activity that's fairly continuous in nature and can elevate and keep your heart rate in its target zone. But remember, any activity from the pyramid is good for you. These are just the ones that would work best with the counting heart rate method for cardiovascular fitness. How do you know if you have good cardiovascular fitness? The best indicator of cardiovascular fitness is called VO2 max, or maximum oxygen consumption. VO2 is a measure of the body's ability to take and use oxygen for energy. VO2 is generally measured in the lab on a treadmill. The higher the VO2 score, the higher the cardiovascular fitness. Often VO2 max tests are reserved for athletes or others that can afford them. Otherwise, we use what are called field tests because they are performed outside of the lab. These tests are still fairly good measures of cardiovascular fitness. We came out here to the track to demonstrate several field tests, and there are 4 that I'd like to recommend. Details of these protocols can be found on our website, but for now, just let me describe them generally. The first is a walking test. You walk briskly for 1 mile, and at the end of the mile you measure your heart rate, how long it took you to walk the mile. These values are then plugged into a formula to predict your cardiovascular fitness. I really like this test for beginners because it's not too vigorous in nature. A second test is called a step test. Find a bench or step approximately 12 inches high, and with the use of a metronome, step up and down at a cadence of 24 steps per minute for 3 minutes. As soon as the test is completed, sit down and immediately count your heart rate for 1 minute. Make sure to start counting immediately. The lower your heart rate, the higher your cardiovascular fitness. I like step tests because they require very little participant skill. You don't have to be very fit to do them. The test is short in duration and it requires very little equipment. The next test is much more vigorous in nature, but is still widely used to assess cardiovascular fitness. It's called the 12-minute run. The objective is to run as far as you can in 12 minutes. The farther you make it, the higher your cardiovascular fitness. Motivation and pacing are keys to performing well on this test. It takes practice, and it's not recommended for beginners. Since this test is more vigorous, it is usually a better indicator of cardiovascular fitness compared to walking or stepping tests. The 1.5-mile run test is a similar test, but in this case the objective is to run the allotted distance in the shortest amount of time. Again, pacing and motivation are factors. This test is also not the best choice for a beginner. Remember that even though cardiovascular fitness is the most important part of health-related fitness, it's not total fitness. In future segments of this series, we'll cover the other aspects of fitness, including flexibility, muscular strength, muscular endurance, and body composition. As always, remember to choose an activity that you enjoy and can do for a lifetime. I'm Steve Ball.